Okay, welcome to the Panther-Lair Show here on a Tuesday night. Of course, live on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We go live every, let's see here. Looks like we're having an issue right away. We have an issue with the live stream right off the bat. I hope you're not experiencing buffering. I apologize if that is the case. We're trying to run the podcast as smooth as possible, but hopefully it's not an issue that anyone is seeing. So I apologize if you are on the live stream. If you're seeing an issue, I'm checking. It looks like our live stream software says it's healthy. So I apologize to everybody who's tuning in if you are finding any issues with the stream. I hope it's going well. Hopefully things get smoothed out. Sometimes I wonder if there's too many devices connected. You know how everybody always has a lot of devices on their home networks, and certainly that's the case in my house. There's always a lot of stuff going on. There's phones and laptops and tablets and things like that. But anyway, we'll get started here with the podcast for tonight. If you're listening during the week or you're tuned in on the live stream, appreciate everybody who's checking in. I always say the fun part about the live stream is we can have a little conversation, a little back and forth. And I took questions earlier today on Twitter, and so we got some topics to discuss, and we'll run through those. But, you know, you get on the live stream at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com every Tuesday night at 8:30, and you can get in on the conversation. We can interact back and forth. It's almost like a call-in show, except you type your comments instead of calling, and we'll talk about it. We'll go back and forth about it. So it's always kind of fun to do that. A few quick shout-outs and plugs we have to mention. Of course, Home Field Apparel is a big one that we gotta shout out. HomeFieldApparel.com. It's a great place to get pick gear, or really shirts and T-shirts, sweatshirts for maybe not any college in America, but a whole bunch of them. They're licensed with a lot of schools all over the place. I get the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors sweatshirt on tonight. It's soft, keeps its shape. It's great. It's a great sweatshirt, great logo. You can't hate that. I've got a bunch of their T-shirts too. HomeFieldApparel.com. They make pit stuff that's awesome. It's great. If you go check it out at HomeFieldApparel.com, I think you'll like what you see. You know, I think you'll be impressed. You'll like the graphics. You'll like the designs and the logos. And then once you get the shirts, you'll be like, oh, this is one of the softest T-shirts or sweatshirts I've ever worn. This is a great high-quality product, both in how it looks and how it feels and how it fits when you wear it. And hopefully we're going to have a promo a little bit later in the week with Home Field, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. But HomeFieldApparel.com, this is great stuff. Like I said, they got pit stuff, and I have some of those, but then they have schools like Hawaii or Colorado School of Mines and all kinds of stuff. So go check them out, HomeFieldApparel.com. And then, of course, the main website, the real plug, is Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards, and that's where all the magic happens on a daily basis. Conversations, just Pitt conversations going on. And, look, we're getting closer and closer to the time when we're going to be able to go out to bars and go out and hang out with your friends and talk to other people and meet other people in person and go to games and talk about Pitt with your friend at the bar. But you can't quite do that yet. And so the next best thing is to get on the message boards, where there's hundreds and thousands of other dedicated, diehard Pitt fans from all over the country, all over the world. And and talk about Pitt sports, and talk about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports, whether it's football, basketball, recruiting. We produce the content there, and then everybody on Panther-Lair.com talks about it and gets into the conversation and the interaction. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great place to be if you're a Pitt fan. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans, and I can't recommend it enough. So Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the site you want to check out. And obviously a big point of the conversation, a big topic of conversation has been the basketball program and where they're at right now. And, it's coming off a loss. Saturday they played Florida State at home. They lost that game. What was the final? 79-72, I think, was the final. And this is another game that I mean, we're not going to sit and talk about moral victories. We've done that enough this season. But, Pitt, as they currently stand at 9-9 overall, 5-8 in the ACC, 3 of those losses are kind of good losses. And I'm talking specifically about the Florida State game, the Virginia game, and the Louisville game. 3 games where they played pretty good teams, of varying degrees, but good teams overall, I would say, and played them really well and gave them far more of a battle than I think any of us expected. I mean, look, the Louisville game back in December, I don't think anybody expected Pitt to do anything in that game, particularly not when they didn't have, Justin Champagnie or Audis Toney. And they go out and they make a game out of it. They lose by 10, but they make a game out of it. The Virginia game I've talked about a whole lot. They lose that game by, I think, 7, right? But it was really on the strength of a 4-minute stretch where Virginia outscored Pitt 16-0. The other 36 minutes of the game, Pitt was 9 points better. It's a valiant effort. It's an admirable effort. It's a commendable performance. And then this Florida State game as well. I mean, they were projected to lose. I forgot what the line was, but they ended up losing by 7 and really gave Florida State everything they could handle. I thought they acquitted themselves nicely. Now, I'm right there with you. If you're listening to this and you're saying, what are you talking about? It's year 3. Jeff Capel shouldn't be trafficking in good losses. That shouldn't be the thing we're hanging our hat on. And I agree. Okay, I'm looking for any kind of silver lining right now. When the alternatives have been losses to Georgia Tech and Wake Forest and Notre Dame and St. Francis, I'll take what I can get, which is an encouraging loss to Florida State, an encouraging loss to Virginia, an encouraging loss to Louisville. The thing is, at some point you've got to you can take encouragement from some of those losses against good teams, but you've got to be able to balance that then with wins against the not so good teams. And that's where Pitt has struggled. And I mean, you could throw in the Virginia Tech game as well. It was a good win. They beat a good team, but how can you also lose to Georgia Tech the way you did and lose to Wake Forest the way you did and lose to Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera? And that's the problem, is that there's such extremes with this Pitt basketball team. There's such inconsistency with this Pitt basketball team. And I've taken to saying it's unpredictability, but the reality is they're becoming predictable. And what's become predictable over the last 10 games or so, I guess, 9 games maybe. 8 games, I guess is how you would say it, since the Duke game. What's become predictable is this team blowing games. And it's concerning. I don't think there's any question about it. Now, I know I'm going to get to a question here from Michael B in a second. He jumped in as a super chatter, and we very much appreciate that. I know, reading the message boards, people talk about late season collapses, and Jeff Capel's had late season collapses at Pitt, and he had late season collapses at Oklahoma. Look, man, I can't quantify what role Jeff Capel has in a team, if teams continue to have late season collapses. What I will say is I don't think Oklahoma is very relevant right now, at least in that regard. If you want to look at Oklahoma as an example of strong recruiting from Jeff Capel, I'd say, okay, he did that. But I couldn't tell you why Oklahoma struggled down the stretch in Jeff Capel's time there, and I couldn't really tell you what relevance that has to his current situation at Pitt. There's something not connecting with this team and with these players. Particularly when you have games like some of those ones I mentioned, some of those bad losses or not so good losses, the losses outside of Florida State, Virginia, and Louisville. There's something not connecting. Something's not working. And either the players are losing focus, or they're playing too inconsistent, or they're not taking to their coaching, or the coaches aren't doing an effective job of getting their message across, or preparing the players, or having them ready to go. My guess is it's some combination of all of those things. And as we move through this, and I'm a big believer in taking the long perspective, the big picture view, particularly getting to the end of a season and then taking a step back and saying, okay, where is the program? If you want to come out of a loss or a win, you want to come out of any specific game and say, where's the program right now? Inevitably, your perception of the program is going to be biased by the game you just saw. And it works both ways. I mean, after the Duke game, we all believe Pitt was back, right? How many times do we say that? Pitt's back, Pitt's back. I actually tried to hold back a little bit on saying those things because I know that you get caught up in the moment. And it's the same way after losses, whether it's the Florida State game or Georgia Tech game, NC State game, Wake Forest, whatever game it is. We get caught up in the moment. And we say, wow, where's the Pitt program right now? There's a poll on the message boards after Saturday's game. How confident are you in Jeff Capel's ability to turn the program around? Well, what do you think people are going to say when it's hours after a loss? And actually, the way it worked out, that poll was pretty reflected favorably on Jeff Capel and the fans' perception of him and the fans' optimism in him and belief in him. So I was kind of surprised to see it go that way. But I try to take long view, you know what I mean? To step back and look at the big picture perspective after the season. Right now, Pitt's in the midst of what? They're one win in their last 8 conference games. One win in their last 8 games. Yeah, they're struggling right now. They've lost 4 in a row. They've won 1-7 over the last 8 games. So yeah, it doesn't look good. But we'll get to the end of the season. We'll see where they stand. And they've got winnable games left on the schedule. Games they could win, maybe even should win in some cases. They've got a Wake Forest game coming up. They should be able to give Clemson a game. I think they have NC State again, right? I mean, they should be able to get wins in that stretch. But what we've seen from this program and what we've seen from this team this season is there's not a whole lot you can count on. And that's frustrating because you don't know which Pitt team is going to show up and you don't know how they're going to play on any given night. If they played at their best most nights, they could compete with anybody in this conference, particularly this season. But they don't play at their best most nights. And ultimately, that's going to come back on Jeff Capel. Ultimately, that reflects on him. Ultimately, that's on Capel. The buck stops here, so to speak. But that doesn't really explain how you fix that problem. All right, I want to get to Michael B. He's a super chatter. He jumped in. We really appreciate him. Super chatting is an option there if you want to support the podcast. Make sure your question or your comment gets read. Michael B. says, Chris, 2 questions. Do you think Jeff Capel should and will change his staff for next season? And if Pitt misses the NCAA tournament next year, is he in trouble? Next year, maybe, yeah. Next year will be year 4. If they miss the NCAA tournament, look, it's not going to be a cut and dried simple answer like that. All right, if they miss the NCAA tournament next year, but they're on the bubble, they're right on the verge, they just had a couple games that didn't go their way, they're real close, they get to the NIT and acquit themselves nicely, then he should be all right. If they miss the NIT or if they miss the NCAA tournament the way they're going to miss it this year, with a 1-7 stretch over 8 games, then yeah, he might be in a little bit of trouble heading into year 5. The seat might start warming up. But Jeff Capel's, I think he's got a fairly long leash and probably should have a fairly long leash given what he inherited and what he walked into and the state of the program that he took over. We talked about that last week as well. And I'll continue to believe that. As do his coaching staff. Do I think Capel should and will change his staff for next season? I mean, I'll tell you on the should, I don't know. I have no idea. I think it's far tougher to quantify the performance of assistant coaches and the performance of a coaching staff in basketball than it is in football. I mean, football, you can look at, there's clearly defined recruiting territories. If you want to talk about recruiting, this guy recruits this state, this guy recruits that state. There are clearly defined position groups. You coach the safeties, you coach the linebackers, you coach the tight ends. In basketball, it's so much more of a group effort. And there are geographic areas that guys have ties to and they work in those areas. Some guys work with certain positions. Some guys focus on the guards. Some guys focus on the post players. But on the whole, Jeff Capel has to be able to take an honest evaluation of his staff and say, I can upgrade in this situation. I can get a better coach in that situation. And, when you're struggling like Pitt is right now, when you're going through a stretch like they're going through, when you're having a season like they're having, particularly over the last 8 games, then yeah, you have to take a step back and evaluate everything and say, wait, could we have done better with someone else as one of the 3 assistant coaches? And that's something Jeff Capel's going to have to look at and figure out and evaluate for himself. So I can't sit here and tell you Jeff Capel should make a change to his coaching staff. Just because I think it's a lot harder to sort of identify those things and isolate those things, than it is in some other sports, particularly football. And, we're in Pittsburgh. We have a football perspective on a lot of things, almost everything sports-wise. We have a football perspective. And so I think we look at it that way, but it's not the same thing. And I think it's tougher to like I say, it's tougher to quantify. Let's see here, some other comments and questions coming in. Bart says, every year all I hear is Jeff's players are unhappy with him and they want to transfer, and it's 100% obvious that they quit on him every year. Doesn't matter how good of a coach you are if your players don't believe in you. Audice Tony, it's reported he was unhappy. He completely fell off. Trey McGowan's last year unhappy, fell off, transferred. It's every year. You're hitting on a lot of things there, Bart, and most of them are coherent that I can almost read or I can almost understand what you're saying. Look, first of all, transfers happen all over college basketball, all over college sports. Okay, this is something that's going to happen every year. Every team is going to lose transfers and probably add transfers. It's going to be the rare year when you return your entire eligible roster. Okay, this is just the direction it's heading. I had Jeff Capel as a guest on the podcast last spring. And I said, every year, you've had transfers out, you brought guys in every year. Is this just sort of a product of getting the program built up, or is this something that's probably going to happen every year? Is this, sort of the way of things now? And he said, this is the way of things now. You're going to have transfers. Guys are going to leave your program. You're going to bring guys into your program. That's part of it. Jeff Capel's players are unhappy. I don't know. I mean, you tell me, man. You're saying you hear that, but you tell me if Capel's players are unhappy. Have guys transferred? Yeah. Trey McGowan's transferred. Okay. You're talking about Audice Tony. He's still here, right? He didn't go anywhere. He's been hurt, so he didn't play in the Florida State game. But I thought he played well in the game before that. He went through. He had a rough stretch, and there's any question about it. But last year he was as good as anybody in the second half of the season last year, so he didn't really fall off. At least last season. Obvious that the players quit on him every year. I don't know about that. They've been remarkably inconsistent all season long. This year they lose to St. Francis in the season opener. Did they quit on him in the season opener and then buy back in for the next 8 or whatever games until the Louisville game? Or until after the Duke game? Did they just buy back in for the next 10 games? Last year they lose to Nickel. They beat Florida State, so they were bought in for the season opener, and then they lose to Nickel State. Did they, quit on him then? I don't know. I think you're grasping at straws, Bart. You're saying it doesn't matter how good of a coach you are if your players don't believe in you. Well, in the midst of this 8-game stretch, they beat Virginia Tech. So did they all of a sudden, out of nowhere, decide to start believing again? Or is it just the sign of an inconsistent team that's talented enough to compete with anybody else in their conference, but they're just too inconsistent in their effort and their execution to pull it off? Is that about quitting on your coach, or is that about just being too inconsistent in your performance? Seems like we're talking about two different things there. TRR says, Jeff Capel has sucked the life out of me. Whew. That's rough, man. I feel bad for you. There's a lot of things in this world right now that could be sucking the life out of you, and if Jeff Capel is one of them, I feel your pain, man. I know we get passionate about sports, and I know that it's this Pitt basketball. A lot of people are big time Pitt basketball fans. I understand that, and Pitt's 9-9 now. They were 8-2, and they're 9-9. I get it. They're 5-8 in the ACC. They were 4-1 at one point, and everybody was excited, thinking about another week or two, and they they could be ranked and they're going to make the ACC tournament or NCAA tournament, all this stuff. I understand that. And they've fallen off. But they shouldn't be, sucking the life out of you. Not yet, at least. TR says, how does the so-called recruiting guru come up short on his first full class and not have one recruit for 2021? Or for 2021? Well, Capel's first full class was the class of 2019 that had Ryan Murphy, Justin Champagny, Abdul Kareem Koulibaly, and Gerald Drumgoole. Now, yeah, I think Capel's a really good recruiter, but I think there's only so much you can do in college basketball if you're not at a blue blood, and you're not at a program that's experiencing a lot of success. And I've talked about this before. I've talked about the struggle of Pitt basketball. I've talked about the difficult situation that Capel walked into, that he took over a team that hadn't won. Obviously, we know they went 0-18 in the ACC a year earlier. And so he comes in, and they win like 3 ACC games that year. And we're all excited. We're all looking forward to it. It's great. This is huge improvement. He's really turning the program around. And it was understandable. If you have that perspective where we're close to the program, we're all watching it closely, and they go from not winning any conference games to winning 3, that's exciting. That's a big step forward. Well, everywhere else in the world that looks at it, or everywhere else in the world of college basketball that looks at it, says, you guys only won 3 games. Winning 3 games is not all that big of a deal. Winning only 3 games is not turning any heads. And that's the reality of the situation. And Pitt is not a blue blood. So Pitt was able to recruit well when they were having success. When the program was successful, was consistently, a top 10, top 5 team, and they were winning the Big East, and they were, perennial NCAA tournament and all that stuff. They had established themselves, but they fell off the map. They fell off the map completely. They fell off the radar of college basketball in the Kevin Stallings years. It was a joke and a laughing stock when Stallings was hired, and the only time anybody paid attention to Pitt over the next 2 years was when they got their brains beat in, or Stallings yelled at Louisville fans. And that's what Capel was recruiting on. And so, yeah, his first full recruiting class, which, never mind the fact that when he first shows up, he gets Audice Toney, Xavier Johnson, and Trey McGowan's, like a couple months after he gets hired. Never mind that. But his first full recruiting class, yeah, Murphy, Champagny, Koulibaly, and Drumgoole. It's not great. Not a real highly rated class. 3 3-star recruits and a 2-star recruit. But then he turns around the next year, this past year's class, the guys who are freshmen this year, and he gets 2 4-star kids in Will Jeffress and John Hughley. Now, we know what those guys have become. We know that Jeffress isn't ready to play yet. And we know Hughley got in trouble. But, in terms of recruiting, he recruited a couple of 4-star guys in that class, had a top 20 class, one of Pitt's highest rated classes in, a decade or something like that. So I don't think his recruiting's been awful. Now, he doesn't have any recruits signed for 2021, for this current recruiting class. And it seems like Pitt is sort of focused in on Efton Reed, and it doesn't appear they got a lot of targets out there beyond him. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Pitt basketball recruiting and the open scholarship spots and kind of what fits and what they need and what they might try to do and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think the recruiting's been as bad as people make it out to be. And we'll see how this 2021 class finishes, but they're working hard on 2022, getting involved with some good players there. I don't think he's been as bad as people have claimed when it comes to the recruiting. All right, so I asked, I went on Twitter and said, give me questions. Football, basketball, recruiting, whatever's on your mind. Let me have it, and and we'll talk about it on the podcast tonight. So we'll jump into it here. So, we got another comment there in the live stream. Michael B. says, I read on the message board that after the first 5 games in ACC play in each of Capel's 3 seasons, his overall record is finishing the season is 6-30. How can anybody defend that? Well, I think you can look at the roster he inherited in 2018-19. I think that's a pretty good place to start. And then you can have the last 2 seasons of inconsistent play. You tell me, how does a coach differently in the final, 15 games of the conference schedule? Like, what do you see that he's doing different? Like, what explanation do you think there is other than just he's bad, Pitt's bad, everything's bad? I don't understand. Like if you have some sort of actionable plan or some sort of real explanation, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, Capel's teams have struggled down the stretch. Guess what? They lost to Nicholls State in the second game of the year. They lost to St. Francis in the first game of the year. They've struggled throughout the season, each of the last 3 seasons. They've been inconsistent and unable to string together consistent, effort and execution. And they've shown this season that they're good enough to compete with anybody in the ACC if they come out with a consistent effort. And, I don't know. Some of that is on Cable. Cable has to do a better job coaching the players, getting them motivated, and getting them ready to go. But at the same time, some of that has to fall on the players as well, right? I mean, those guys have to come out ready to play on a nightly basis. Anyway, questions and comments from the Twitter sphere on all subjects, football, basketball, and recruiting. And actually, we'll start off with some football stuff. NFL Gimpy asked on Twitter, for football, how do you see the running back situation playing out in 2021? Vincent Davis was clearly the guy at the end, but obviously the running game left a lot to be desired in 2020. Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the biggest questions facing Pitt in 2021 is what's going to happen with the running game. How effective is it going to be? Is it going to be effective? Are they going to be able to, are they going to be able to run the ball? And that's a big question. It's who is going to lead the charge in the running game? Who is going to get the bulk of the carries? I will say that coming into last season, I did not expect Vincent Davis to be the leading running back. I thought it might be A.J. Davis, or I thought, maybe Izzy Abanikanda. I didn't think Vincent Davis could be an every down back. I didn't think he was built for that. And I mean, to be honest, he's still not a big guy. Now, he had some games where he piled up some carries, but, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a committee effort again. I'm not sure. If you look at the guys who are returning, who have playing time and experience, you're looking at Vincent Davis. You're looking at, A.J. Davis. You're looking at, Todd Sibley to some extent. Not one of those guys has really shown himself to be a number one back, an every down back, over the course. And we've got sort of an ample sample size now. Ample sample. 2 years of Vincent Davis. This is 4 years now of A.J. Davis, 4 years of Todd Sibley, 3 years on the field plus a redshirt season. We've seen these guys, and I think we have a general idea of who they are and what they are. And I'm not sure if any of them has shown that they can be an every down back. I'm still interested to see what Izzy Abanikanda can do. He, I think, was a bit of a liability in pass blocking, which is probably why he didn't see as much playing time. I think he got hurt at some point during the season as well, so that kind of limited his opportunities on the field. But I still think he's got a lot of potential. I think he's faster than those bigger backs like A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley or Daniel Carter, but I think he's also, he's bigger and I think stronger than Vincent Davis. So he's that middle ground guy who's got that combination of strengths, of skills, and he might be the one who can kind of emerge from this group. But I think it's going to be a combination attack. A committee attack with those running backs. And, can a committee attack work? I think it can. You've got to establish the running game, though. And, part of that depends on those players. But you've got to have an effective running game that threatens opposing defenses. And because if not, you're just shuffling guys out there, and I don't know if it makes a whole much. I don't think it makes a lot of impact. I think you need, you need more commitment to the running game, and you need better pass or run blocking up front. And if you do that, then I think those guys can settle into a groove. You can have someone maybe establish himself as the number one back, and you can really get something set up out there. You can really get something working with the running game, which they haven't had for the past 2 seasons, right? Roman Purds asks, any chance we see some go-go elements mixed into the offense this year, or do we see the same Whipple offense? I'm thinking it'll be the latter. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with Brendan Marion joining the staff. He's obviously got he has established himself as a young, innovative offensive mind. Developed this go-go offense during his time at Howard and William and Mary. Or is when he really put it into place there, and then probably was going to bring some of it to Hawaii. I'm assuming he brought some of it to Hawaii. I think some of his ideals will carry over. I think he's in the offensive meetings. He's going to be in the meetings with Mark Whipple. You don't just sit there silently. You offer your input and your feedback and your ideas. If you saw, there was an article in The Athletic. I think Bruce Feldman wrote it, and it was about Brendan Marion and a couple other guys who were sort of who are assistant coaches at lower level schools, FCS, not even FCS, like D2, D3 schools, and how they worked their way up. And I mean, it's just, I don't want to say it was relentless self-promotion, but I mean, they just kept hammering away and getting their name out there as much as they could, and pushing their ideas and pushing themselves as a rising star coach, and they worked their way up. I mean, they earned it all the way. But it gave me the impression that, Brennan Marion is probably going to go into those offensive staff meetings with Mark Whipple and the rest of those guys, and he's going to offer his ideas. Now, Mark Whipple's he's an older coach. He's been around for a while. He's not going to completely upend what he likes to do on offense. But I think he also has been around long enough to know that you got to be open to different ideas sometimes. And so I would expect him to incorporate some things. Is it going to be much that we're going to be able to sit in the press box or the stands and look at and say, okay, that's go-go right there? Yeah, maybe not. Every now and then we would do that with the Steelers this past season. Whoa, that's a Matt Canada play because they ran a jet sweep, or they did a shovel pass to the shovel pass to the fullback or something like that, or the tight end or something like that. But, maybe you'll see some things here and there. But ultimately, I think, Mark Whipple's focus is going to be on driving the offense through Kenny Pickett, getting Pickett more comfortable in the offense, getting more comfortable with the things that Pickett can do and likes to do and wants to do, and getting him on the same page with the receivers, and then getting working with Dave Borberly to develop a pass blocking scheme that can give Pickett time to execute, in addition to, trying to get the run game going and all of that. Dave Yaz asked, with a free year for whoever wants it, is there an uncertainty in how many scholarships Pitt men's basketball will have available for this 2021-2022 class? That seems to be the snag in recruiting right now, in my opinion. And how might you see this playing out? Well, it's going to be interesting. Pitt, obviously, they have 13 scholarship players right now. 2 seniors, Terrell Brown, Nike Sibande. 2 juniors, Audis Tony and Xavier Johnson. 4 sophomore eligible players, Ithiel Horton, Gerald Drumgoole, Justin Champagny, Abdul Kareem Koulibaly, and then the 5 freshmen, Femi Odekale, Noah Collier, Will Jeffers, Maxim Madison, and then John Hughley. And so there's a few things at play there. One is the Hughley situation. You don't know if he's going to come back. If he comes back, that's 1 fewer scholarship. If he doesn't come back, that's 1 more scholarship. And it might not be a question of him coming back. That might not be the best way to say it. It's more about whether Pitt would take him back, and that's going to depend on a lot of factors, quite a few of which are not in Pitt's control. So that's when you have to kind of put in parentheses that scholarship spot might be open and it might not be. But then you have the seniors, Terrell Brown and Nike Sibande. And the thing there is that's 2 scholarship spots that are going to be open, no matter what. They're going to be open because even if those 2 guys decide to come back, the NCAA said seniors could come back. They have a free year if they want to come back for an extra year of eligibility. So they could come back, but if they do, they won't count against the scholarship limits. It's like the situation with football with guys like Kenny Pickett and Phil Campbell and A.J. Davis and Chase Pine, Lucas Kroll and Jake Zelinskis and Keldrick Wilson. I get them all? I feel like there might have been one more. Oh, Cal Adamitis. These guys are coming back. There's like a dozen guys in football. They're going to call them super seniors on the football side, and they're not going to count against the 85-man scholarship limit. Same thing in basketball. Brown and Sibande could come back and be super seniors and not count against the 13-man scholarship limit. So you've got a minimum of 2 scholarships that are going to be open for this 2021 recruiting class, or 2 scholarships that will be open on your 2021-2022 roster. And then you look through the rest of the roster and you look at guys who might potentially decide to transfer, not necessarily because they've given up on the coach, but because players transfer. They look for opportunities at other schools if they don't feel like they're getting the best opportunity they can at the school they're at. So I always hesitate to sort of speculate on those things. It's, I don't know. It's just never sat right with me to sit and, look at a roster. I'd written down Pitt's basketball roster. It's never sat right with me to go down and be like, well, this guy's going to go. He's not even going to play. This guy stinks. This guy here is dead. I just don't I don't care for doing that. But I think you can look at the roster and probably find some guys who aren't getting a lot of playing time, who probably aren't going to get a lot of playing time in the future, and they're probably going to look and see what else they can find out there. So you start with 2 open scholarships. Probably going to add another 1 or 2. Now, that makes the sort of lack of 2021 recruiting buzz a little bit more interesting when you're potentially going to see maybe 3 scholarships open, depending on what happens with John Hughley. You could have 3 or 4. And they seem to really be focused on Efton Reed, the 5-star center. Really kind of one guy. Now, the thing is, they're not just going to try to add high school prospects. There's always the transfer route. And Jeff Capel's added transfers every year. He's added 4 over the last 3 recruiting classes. I have no reason to doubt that he's going to add at least 1 this year. I think he's going to try and add 1 every year. It's been mixed results. Nike Sabande, pretty good game against Florida State. Not a whole lot the rest of the season. Ithiel Horton and Eric Hamilton came in last year's class. Hamilton gave some reserve center minutes, had a couple games where you were like, oh, you're not bad. Horton, I think, has come into his own and shown some of the potential. And then Sidney Nadir in that first year, nice defensive guard off the bench, I guess. So mixed results on the transfers, but he's going to keep going after him, I think. I think Jeff Capel is going to keep trying to add transfers because that's part of the game now. I think football and basketball, when coaches look at their rosters and consider their needs and look at opportunities or available avenues to fill those needs, transfers are a part of it. Transfers are, what they're being considered. And you have guys scouting high school players, you have guys scouting junior college players, and you have guys scouting transfer players because that's just part of the recruiting process now. As much as anything else, it's part of the recruiting process. So 2 at least 2 open scholarships, maybe 3, maybe 4, who knows? It certainly looks right now like Pitt would like to get 1 high schooler and then, I guess, fill in the rest with transfers. I guess. Let's see here. Get through some of these questions were sort of repeated. Kevin Plaucha, who's actually on the live stream tonight, we see him. He asked a question on Twitter earlier. He said, with the St. John's game that's scheduled for next season, and considering what Justin Champagnie said about it, do you think he will stay another year? So the Champagnie thing is interesting. Yeah, I mean, Justin Champagnie, when talking about playing against St. John's, where, of course, his twin brother Julian Champagnie plays, he said, I'm really looking forward to it. Can't wait. Always wanted to play against him. Going to be fun. Can't wait to have that game next year. And that got everybody worked up. Oh, wow, look, Justin Champagnie is going to come back. Here's the thing. I think there's a good chance Justin Champagnie does return to Pitt for next season. I don't think it's because of that St. John's game. If you have an opportunity to go, if the time is right to go to the pros and get paid to play your sport, whether it's basketball or football, I don't think you turn down that opportunity just because of a scheduled game. As special as it would be to play against your brother, Justin Champagnie is a guy who's had 2 injuries in the last 2 years that we know of, right? And I don't know why you would come back if you could go. Now, what I think could lead Champagnie back to Pitt next season, and what I think has a very good chance of leading Champagnie back to Pitt next season, is his knee injury. He was hurt. He missed some time earlier this season. Didn't miss as many games as he would have because games kept getting postponed. But I think it's pretty clear he is not 100% recovered from that. And if he needs to have surgery after the season, I would think that would considerably hamper his options and make it far less appealing to go to the NBA this offseason because you are going in, I don't want to say as damaged goods, but you're going to be limited in what you can do in terms of pre-draft workouts and showcasing yourself for NBA scouts who might want to see different things in your game that maybe you're not showing right now. I think there's real possibility that, if Champagnie needs to have surgery, that he could come back because of that, because he sees a realistic opportunity to improve his draft stock. And then getting to play against his brothers, huge bonus, of course. But I shouldn't speak for him. This is my own sort of hypothesizing. I have a hard time seeing that game, though, being the primary motivation to come back to college for another year. Let's see. Nate Grant says, can we expect Pat Narduzzi and his staff to keep bringing in top 25 classes every year? Well, that's a good question, Nate. I think this next year is going to be tough to bring in a top 25 class. I think a lot of schools are going to have small classes, but I think Pitt especially is going to have a small class. And if you get a very small class, it's tough to get into the top 25 if you don't have, really high-end, a bunch of 5-star or a bunch of 4-star guys in your class. I don't know if Pitt's going to sign a bunch of 4-star guys in the 2022 recruiting class, so I think it's going to be tough to balance out the small quantity with a high level of quality. So I think their class ranking might drop. But, and this actually kind of goes into another question that came here from CH Jacob 21. He says, looking at, say, a 6-year time period, what kind of results would constitute a successful Pitt football and basketball program? And I think it sort of ties into that, because I think the idea with Pitt football and Pitt basketball, with where they are in their respective sports, what you're always looking for is, and what you can maybe best hope for, is cycles. Cycles where you sort of build up to, you understand what a cycle is. I don't have to break it down like that. You understand the idea of ups and downs and being in sort of a cycle. I would think that, I think the big key, certainly with Pitt football, and I think with basketball as well, is that you get to a point where you have your cycles, where you're peaking every few years. But the key is making sure that the bottom, the low points of those cycles doesn't drop. Those things don't drop too low, right? So I've said that, I think in football, 8 regular season wins should be the baseline almost every year. That you should start off with 8 regular season wins. That should be the expectation. And maybe once every 4 or 5 years you have that year where you win 7, maybe 6 if you had a really tough schedule and injuries went against you and that kind of thing. But it should be a baseline of 8 regular season wins. Basketball, I'd like to say 20. But I think that's probably achieving on the higher side, maybe 18 regular season wins is the baseline. And then your cycles sort of build off of there. You know what I mean? That's sort of, the bottom of what you work toward. And if you dip below that, you don't want to do that more than once or twice. But you want to keep it above that level and kind of work your way up through those cycles from 8 wins in the regular season for football, or maybe say 18 or so for basketball. And then, so that's number one, is how high you can keep the bottom, so to speak. But then number 2, to CH Jacob 21's question about, what over a 6-year time period, what would constitute a successful program for football and basketball? You got to keep the bottom high, 8 or 18, in the, at least as we're saying it here. And then you need to capitalize when you hit the peak. And, there have been different times where we've seen this Pitt football program hit the peak. Whether it was, 2008, 2009, I think probably is the most recent time. Before that, maybe 2002, 2003. We'll get to what we've seen over the last decade and trying to find out where the peak was there. And then basketball, obviously, that the 08-09 season, the Elite 8 year. I mean, that was the peak. And if you're a program like Pitt in football or basketball, you're not going to get those opportunities every year the way, Duke or Carolina or Kansas or Kentucky are going to have them. 3 out of every 4 years, you've got a chance to capitalize and go to the Final Four. If you're Pitt in football or basketball, you need to be able to capitalize when you've got that opportune moment. You know what I mean? That's what makes Scotty Reynolds sting so much. That's what makes Marty Gilliard sting so much, is that the opportunity really was there. The team was good enough. They had performed well enough to that point. They just had to take that step. They had to finish the deal. They had one more thing to do. They had to stop Scotty Reynolds from driving the length of the court. They had to stop Marty Gilliard from returning a kick. Because if they do those things, football's in the Sugar Bowl and basketball's in the Final Four. But they couldn't capitalize in those moments. They couldn't capitalize at those prime times when they were at the peak of the cycle. You have to be able to capitalize in those instances. Now, basketball obviously has not had that kind of, the Butler game, I guess. You want to look at that as another peak where they, miss an opportunity, potentially capitalize. Football, I don't know. I don't know where or when they had the opportunity to capitalize, really. There's a question here from Matt Sable. Was last year Pat Narduzzi's best chance of breaking through, or should I hold out hope for the future? I don't know. I thought it was. I thought 2020 was setting itself up to be the opportunity. And then they changed the schedule and put Clemson on the schedule. I think Notre Dame was already on the schedule, so that wasn't a change. But they put Clemson on the schedule. And that made it more difficult. Now, ultimately, that doesn't matter when you lose to NC State and Boston College. But that change, that changed the perspective on 2020. There are favorable schedules coming up. Whether those will line up with a talented Pitt team, which I think that was the key with 2020. They had a fairly loaded defense, a very strong defense, enough veteran players on offense that you should have high expectations, and then a schedule that more or less set up favorably. But they couldn't capitalize, and the schedule got changed, and they weren't able to take advantage of the situation that they would have had. So, maybe the 2020 that didn't happen would have been one of the opportunities, maybe the most recent opportunity for Pitt football to capitalize, maybe the first opportunity for Pitt football to capitalize since 2009 or so. But I think those are the two keys. If you're Pitt football, you're Pitt basketball. If you are a Pitt football coach or a Pitt basketball coach and you want to be successful long-term here, those are the two things you need to do. You need to keep the bottom up, and then you need to capitalize when you get a chance at one of the peaks. And that doesn't mean going to the ACC championship game every year. That doesn't mean going to the Final Four every year. That means that once every 4 or 5 years or 6 years, you're going to have that opportunity, and you take advantage of it. And you do get to the ACC championship game, and maybe you even win it. You do get to the NCAA tournament. Maybe you, or I shouldn't say you do get to the NCAA tournament. You get to the Sweet 16, and you're able to push forward and get into the Elite Eight, and maybe even crack the Final Four or something like that. You have to be able to capitalize when you've got things lined up, I think is what it comes to. All right, another one. Kevin, I'm sorry about your last name, Kevin. Kevin Illies? Kevin Illies says, the defense seemingly will take a step back from this year from the 2019-2020 performance. Do you think it'll resemble more of the 2016 defense, or have we reached a point where 2017-2018 is more of the floor? Losing not only the pass rush, but both safeties is the glaring concern. That's a good question. And I think seeing what Pitt's defense is this season is a big question mark for this program. For this team. I don't think there's any question about it. Finding out, how they fill in with some key guys, finding out how they get a replacement, in the pass rush, as you pointed out, Kevin, sorry, I got distracted there for a second. You're going to need to replace Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver. That's your big first question. I think bigger question than even replacing the safeties. And because I think the safeties, it's going to be hard to replace DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford. But when Ford opted out, you got a lot of playing time for Brandon Hill. And Eric Hallett has gotten a lot of playing time as well. So you've got some experience back there, which I like. And I think Hallett and Hill, especially Hill, I think could be really good players. I know Hill in his first game after Paris Ford opted out, or I should say after Paris Ford left the team, Brandon Hill whiffed on a tackle that led to a long quarterback run for Florida State's quarterback, but he ended up playing a pretty good game after that. So, I'm pretty optimistic about him. I think he can be pretty good. And I think Hallett can be a good player as well. They're going to need some guys to step up. I don't think there's any question. They're going to need guys to step up, at a number of positions. I'm a little less concerned about safety, though, than I am about defensive end, because Weaver and Jones were just that good. I mean, you have 2 consensus first-team All-Americans. It's going to be hard for just about anybody to replace 2 consensus first-team All-Americans. Those are big shoes to fill. But I do think there's some talented players in, sort of in the waiting. I think Habakkuk Baldonado is going to be really good. I think John Morgan can be really good. I think Deslin Alexandra has shown that he can be good and probably would have played a more prominent role this past season if Rashad Weaver didn't come back or if Patrick Jones didn't come back. But when you have both of those guys, it cuts down on the reps that are available for a guy like Alexandra. And then you got some younger players like Dayon Hayes coming in or coming up after a pretty impressive showing in the games that he played as a freshman. So it's an unproven group. And those guys, Jones and Weaver set the bar so high that it's going to be tough for those guys that are coming in to replace them. I think what I've said about Pitt's defense in 2021 is that, and particularly the pass rush, is I think it could be a situation where inevitably it takes a step back. Defensive end position will take a step back because you don't have anybody as good as Weaver and Jones were this past season. You don't have anybody who's ready to play at that level yet. So I think the defensive end position is going to take a step back, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. I think it could still be pretty good and one of the strengths of the defense, and you could get some strong play out of those guys while also not quite being on the level that Jones and Weaver were at. So kind of both. I don't think the defense is going to go back to the 2016 levels. I think, like Kevin said, I think 2017, 2018, particularly second half of 2017 and most of the sort of final 2/3 of the 2018 season, I think that is the floor. I think that's, the baseline of what this defense should be going forward, and I think they'll be better than that more often than not. In most occasions, I think they'll be better than that. Phone Arduzzi asked, do you think Coach Marion's bold scholarship offers will pay off? Lots of highly ranked players getting offers from him early. Yeah, Brennan Marion hasn't been officially announced by Pitt as the receivers coach yet, but he's active on the recruiting trail by all indications, offering some guys who are among the top-ranked players at their positions nationally, offering some guys who are among the top-ranked prospects regardless of a position nationally. And I admire it. It's nice to be ambitious. That's good. I don't see much coming out of those offers, but I admire the ambition. You know what I mean? Go for it. Gung-ho. Shoot your shot, right? But also keep your focus on some of the guys that you can realistically get. He's offering some guys right now who have offers from across the country, and they live across the country. There's guys in Texas and guys in California and all that stuff, and that's cool. That's fun. But I've seen similar situations in the past, and coaches will get really ambitious and they'll fire offers out there, and they don't always turn into anything. So, that's just sort of the nature of it. But I think Brennan Marion's going to do a really good job for Pitt on the recruiting trail. I really do. Let's see here. Question. RJCman38 jumped in as a super chatter. Thank you, man. We really appreciate that. He says, when does Heather Lyke shake up Jeff Capel's staff by demanding better results on all fronts? Well, Heather Lyke is not going to demand that Jeff Capel shake up his staff. At least I don't think she would do that. If I've said this once, I've said it a million times. The athletic director, or in this case, the director of athletics, hires the head coach to run the program and asks the head coach to, or entrusts the head coach with running the program, entrusts the head coach with hiring assistant coaches and coordinators and putting together the best staff he can with the resources he has to find success and operate the program well. When the director of athletics or the athletic director starts demanding coaching changes on the staff, I think is a recipe for trouble. I think you hire someone that you believe can run the program well and put together a good staff, and then you let them do that. And obviously there's always consultation and there's interaction and there's, conversation and evaluations and all those kinds of things and constant contact and communication and everything. But for the most part, I think the good athletic directors, good directors of athletics, let the coaches run the programs. With the understanding that if the results are not up to par, and that's results on or off the field, if it's not up to par, then the head coach is ultimately responsible for it. And so the head coach understands that the buck stops with them as far as their superiors, the higher ups are concerned. And so if, the offense isn't working or the defense isn't working or this isn't working or that isn't working, then it's up to the head coach to make the necessary changes, to make the necessary evaluations. The chancellor isn't firing the head football coach. And I don't think the athletic director should fire the coordinators. It's not exactly the same thing. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's pretty close. I think you hire someone to run a program. The chancellor hires an athletic director to run the athletic department. The athletic director hires a coach to run the program. And then, so on down the line. And each line is responsible for what happens in the thing they're hired to operate. So I've often said that. I think it's a recipe for trouble. I think you create issues in the relationship when you start demanding that coaches be fired. I don't think Heather Lyke walks into Pat Narduzzi's office and says, you have to fire Mark Whipple. But I think when they evaluate the season at the end, I think you can say, boy, the offense didn't seem to be very effective. Or something along those lines. I don't know how those conversations actually go. I've never been an athletic director, and I've never been a head football coach of a major Division I college. I can tell you what I have been, though, and that's a proud wearer of homefieldapparel.com. I mean, check out this sweatshirt, this Hawaii Rainbow Warrior sweatshirt. I'm going to have to check Brendan Murray and see what he thinks about this thing. But it's the softest sweatshirt I own. It's perfect fit. It's held its shape. I wear it all the time. I wash it a bunch, and it still holds its form perfectly well. It really is maybe the best sweatshirt I own. Is why I wear it all the time, and it's super soft, super comfortable, and it's got a great logo on it. I mean, how can you beat that? Homefieldapparel.com. You got to go check that out. Just became Canadian for a second there. Not sure. This is not a hockey podcast, but you got to go check it out. Homefieldapparel.com. Keep an eye out. We should have a promo later in the week for Panther-Lair readers with Homefield. Get you a little bit of a discount there, so keep an eye out for that promo coming out. And, of course, stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com and, of course, message boards, where all these conversations we have here on the podcast and on the live stream, we can have right there on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So go check that out. We would definitely appreciate it. I tell you what else I would appreciate. If you're watching the live stream or even if you're listening to the podcast later in the week, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's not like subscribing to Panther-Lair.com. It doesn't cost any money. It's not a paid subscription. It's just clicking that subscribe button on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom. Go do that right now. We really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who likes the live stream and clicks the like button. That's great too. We really appreciate it. But go and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks everybody who jumped in the live stream here tonight on Tuesday night. Thanks everybody on Twitter who submitted some questions and gave us some conversation pieces. It was fun to talk about those things. And thanks to everybody who listened to the podcast through the week. Don't forget the Panthers Insider Show Saturday mornings at 8:30. No, at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Not 8:30. 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. So tune in for that on Saturday morning. And then see what else we have. Yeah. Next Tuesday night, we'll be back right here, 8:30 p.m. for another live Panther-Lair show. So tune in. We hope to hear from you then, and see you at the live stream. So thanks again. Have a great week. Have a great weekend coming up, and we will talk to you again next Tuesday night.